Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and we have got an awesome entrepreneur here in today's episode. This is someone who is at the forefront of an industry that it feels like every single week it's changing. We hear about it on TV, we hear about it on the news, and today's entrepreneur is coming up with solutions that are setting people up for success within the world of sports betting. Not just success when it comes to betting, but also understanding the legalities, understanding the considerations, and of course the data that lies beneath all of it. So I'm excited to introduce you to today's guest. His name is Jared Lee. Jared is a sports betting and fantasy sports industry educator and the founder of LetMeBet.com. He has been involved in software engineering and web development for almost 15 years. He studied mechanical and computer engineering at the University of Maryland, and he then started his career as a systems engineer working in the corporate world, and he's always had a passion for hardcore software engineering. Growing up in Buffalo, Jared has also been a diehard Bills fan all of his life, which of course is his introduction and his love for all things sports. He's also been an avid fan of poker since he was young and is generally a fan of all types of card games. So this is something that is so cool to me because I love businesses that are born out of passions. And Jared, when he combines those passions with his very tangible skills of building things, it results in an amazing business. So I'm excited to interview him here today. I'm excited for all of us to learn from his entrepreneurial spirit, his own mindset. He's got awesome energy. I'm excited about this one. Let's dive straight into my interview with Jared Lee. All right, Jared, I am so very excited to have you here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Heck yes. I think it's so cool what you're up to. I'm slightly envious of your skills. Anyone who can build things the way that you can, I think it's such a cool entrepreneurial story. So take us beyond the bio. Who's Jared? How'd you start doing all these cool things?
Yeah, I've always been a fan of building things, specifically with computers. I think I picked up my first HTML for Dummies book when I was in middle school. And ever since then, my interest in computers has sort of exploded. But funny enough, my main focus in college was mechanical engineering with minor in computer engineering. I didn't actually focus on the computer side of things. In hindsight, I probably should have, but you live and you learn. And then I started out in the corporate world after graduating, working as a systems engineer, like you said. And it wasn't until, 2 or 3 years in that I sort of realized that this isn't for me. Having an employer is not for me. And I was very naive when I was young in the sense that I didn't know anything about entrepreneurship or, the concept of starting your own company, what that would look like, how rewarding that could be. I just wasn't really exposed to that. So I feel like I got a late start. But, in my 20s, I started to really understand that you can sort of build your own company, and it's not that hard. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's not impossible. It's definitely not a pipe dream. People do it all the time. And even if you're not successful, and success can mean a lot of different things, but even if you're not financially successful or you have to close it down one day, it could still be rewarding and it could be worth it because of the wisdom that you gain. And that's one of those things where I really realized that you shouldn't be afraid of failing. You shouldn't be afraid of trying to start a company and eventually failing, because you can take that wisdom and experience and go start something new. And I would argue that most, successful people that you come across that are entrepreneurs, they started something that actually failed and you never really hear about. And they probably won't even tell you about it, but they wouldn't have done it any other way because they got so much experience and wisdom out of it that ended up being practical for their future ventures. So I really started to try and tell myself not to be afraid and actually, seek out doing things on my own. And that's sort of when I got hooked on just the concept of going on my own, being an entrepreneur, potentially starting my own company, potentially one day. So fast forward, I'm still working in corporate America, but fast forward a few years, and I actually started with a web design company that also did SEO. And the revenue from the web design was fine. It was okay, but we actually found that the SEO work was actually our most profitable because it was actually a monthly subscription model as opposed to a one-time payment model. So after we got good at SEO and it was cash flowing, I started to realize that we're actually really good at this, and that this could be our edge. And having that SEO mindset is actually how I conceived of letmebet.com. As you said, I'm a big football fan. Football was my first love, and as an extension of that, fantasy football. So, but then I realized that I really can't neglect the sports betting industry either, because it's just exploding right now. Ever since the 2018 decision to strike down that federal ban on sports betting, that's when it sort of exploded. So combining fantasy football, sports betting, and my edge, which is, at the time it was SEO and web development, I decided to create letmebet.com. And the North Star has always been to build it as a product that I would want to use, because that's exactly what it is. It has tools and educational resources that I wish I had when I started out in not just sports betting, but fantasy football. So that's where we are today.
Yeah, I love that overview, Jared, for so many reasons, especially because you called out something that we're trying to solve that gap in the marketplace. Too few people are introduced to entrepreneurship and they don't know where to start. And that's why I'm so appreciative of stories like yours, Jared, because you did take that initiative and you said, I actually want to build something. I want to create something brand new. And I love hearing that insight into how you started letmebet.com. Take us there, though, because, Jared, I would argue that a lot of people have ideas and they talk to their friends and their family and they're like, this business should exist. I wonder if it exists. And obviously you examine the landscape, which is easier for you because it's something you're personally interested in. I love that barometer of success of, I want this to be something that I would use. You didn't just have the idea, though. You've gone ahead and built it. What did that decision point look like? What did that transition look like? I want to hear more about that.
I will argue until the cows come home that ideas are worthless. And I'm not the first person to say that. A lot of people will agree with me. Ideas themselves are worth nothing. It's all about execution. Whatever allegedly unique idea that you might have come up with, I'm willing to bet money that somebody else thought of it somewhere else in the world. So really, it's all about execution. It's about follow through. The hard part is not conceiving the idea. It's actually making sacrifices in life, putting in the legwork, getting your hands dirty, and even when it feels like something might be failing 6 or 12 months in, it's not going anywhere, having that drive to keep going. That is what makes an entrepreneur successful, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. And Jared, I would say that your industry is more complex than most. You've already mentioned that it is changing very fast. Obviously, it's a hot industry right now. You chose to have your business be in that industry. What's it like to stay on top of all the things that I would imagine probably weekly it's changing?
Yeah, because it's such a nascent industry, sports betting is, it feels like I can be more impactful as opposed to getting into an industry that's, well developed for decades, even centuries, right? So that's why I felt like when I started letmebet.com, it was early enough in the industry where I felt like I could make a dent. Just look at it right now. Every year there's still states where sports betting is illegal, but there's a lot of proponents within the state that are trying to legalize it. People are passing or proposing bills all the time, hoping that they get passed. There's a lot of hot states currently where a lot of people in the state are clamoring and hoping for the legalization of sports betting so they don't have to keep crossing state lines or signing up for a VPN to, bet on their phones. Just keeping track of all that, it's hard to find good resources out there. So I felt like I could build something that tracks the legal status of sports betting, daily fantasy sports, pick'em betting, which, those are all things where really, depending on who you ask, it can be considered sports betting or not. And each state has its own regulations, and they identify different activities as either sports betting or not, which is why, there's distinctions between daily fantasy sports and sports betting, depending on the state that you're in. Just keeping track of all that, coming up with blog posts that are educational, just explaining the absolute basics of sports betting. When I started sports betting, I didn't know what a money line was or a point spread was. I didn't know what it meant if a team was -1 or +1. These are very common questions. And don't take my word for it. These are all SEO keywords that are very commonly searched for. So I felt like I could be a resource for that because, when I did the legwork to educate myself, I realized that I could actually just encapsulate what I found and just put it in writing or come up with tools. We have a lot of good tools on letmebet.com. Things like moneyline calculators, parlay calculators, odds converters, things that, require a little math. The math itself is decently straightforward. Anyone can do it, but it's nothing that you want to do in your head in the moment. So we have a lot of convenient tools that I think, provide a lot of benefit to anyone, not just novice sports bettors, but even experienced ones.
Yeah, Jared, it's fun to ask you this question because I love the fact that you've already called out your SEO background and how much you think through those terms, but also, of course, your engineering background. You're introducing us to some of the tools that you have on letmebet.com. How do you view your company? Is it a content-based business? Obviously, you've got your state tracker and comprehensive guides. Is it a tech company with the various tools that you're rolling out? Is content the bridge through which you get traffic? I'd love to hear the way you talk about your company.
The one-word answer is it's a startup, because it's to be determined what the exact model is going to look like. Right now, we're hyper-focused on growth. I would say, you mentioned content. That is probably the most accurate way to describe it. It's a content website. And, with an SEO play, strategically speaking, in terms of growth. And we have a good amount of traffic right now. We could decide to switch on advertising right now if we wanted to, but it's one of those things where it's not, worth pigeonholing ourselves into, one type of model just yet. It's like that quote from the movie Social Network. It's like you're throwing the greatest party in the world, but you're telling people they have to leave by 10:30. So we want to avoid, really coming up with a rigid model with this early on. I think in the meantime, we're just going to keep creating content that people actually find useful, creating tools that people actually find useful, not just in sports betting, but in fantasy sports. And then I think, we're just in the growth phase. So we'll have to see what it turns into.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, as someone who my first ever business was a soccer blog, just like you, I was driven by passion, and my first love for sure was soccer. My second love was writing, so I loved writing about soccer as a business. The one lesson that I learned really early on, and Jared, I'm sure that you've already given this a lot more thought. I had no idea what I was doing when I started out, but I didn't realize the difference between a consumer and a customer. And so obviously that's so important for all of us to figure out in our businesses. And I know that listeners are probably thinking, especially when they see your website, they're going to think, this is such a cool business. You are at the forefront of it. You obviously build beautiful and useful things that scratch your own itch and the itch of so many others. How have you fleshed out the strategic side of it about customer versus consumer? Where do you see letmebet.com fitting into that marketplace?
I don't know that I really make a hard distinction between the two just yet. Working behind the scenes when I'm building letmebet.com, I'm so focused on growth in the SEO sense. I'm just kind of monitoring our rankings on search engines and watching the traffic, how it's ebbing and flowing each day. If we make this one change, did it benefit us, and by how much? Was it really worth our time? Did I just spend 2 months building this really complicated tool for, just marginal differences in traffic, or is this something that's going to, be a huge source of traffic? We're kind of figuring it out as we go. We do know that pumping out content on a steady basis is a major part of it. We definitely want to keep that going. And I think we just see anybody that visits the website as a customer. And the sense that they're a customer will probably change once we start, monetizing in a specific way. But for right now, I don't know that I really make a hard distinction between the two.
Yeah, I love getting into that entrepreneurial mind though, because that is such a fun phase to be at. What I'm really hearing, and probably a lot of it is thanks to the fact that you have the skill set that you have, is you have the luxury of trying things, of building new things, launching them into the marketplace and seeing what that adoption is, letting the market guide that. And so my question to you, I always love asking people with your type of skill set is it a blessing and a curse that you can act so quickly and build new things? How do you figure out, here are the experiments that we want to run and that we want to deploy versus having that strategic focus?
It's definitely a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because, if I come up with an idea or I decide that, coming up with a new feature is a good idea, we can act on it pretty quickly and do it ourselves. But that's also a curse because it's time consuming, right? I mentioned earlier about making sacrifices. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs that are listening to me will know exactly what I'm talking about. You have to make sacrifices. You probably can't, go out as often as you want to, or, see people you love as often as you want, do things that, brought you joy in the past as often as you did. But it's worth it. And, I know there are people out there who are listening to me that know what I mean, but, when I say that, it's worth it.
Yeah, 100%. It's actually, Jared, years ago, I did an episode basically talking about the juice is worth the squeeze. It doesn't mean that it's easy, but 100% it's worth it. Talk to me about that growth map, knowing that growth roadmap, knowing that you are so growth focused. What's that time horizon that you focus on? Is it days? Is it weeks? Is it months? Is it years? I'm a big fan of quarters. I believe that 90 days, we can transform most things in our life, whether it's business, love, health, fitness, whatever it may be. I always love hearing what other entrepreneurs think though when it comes to time frames.
I used to be very impatient, and I used to think in days or weeks, and thinking in years was unheard of for me. That was too long for me. But I started to realize as I grew older that you really have to think in years, months to years. You can stop and reevaluate things on the order of weeks, but any major decisions are done on the scale of months to years. And you really want to focus on things that compound as opposed to aiming for short-term gains, but sacrificing long-term compounding gains. So it took a while for me to understand that, but right now, as I've matured, I've learned to play the long game for sure.
Yeah, I love that. I always remind listeners that maturity when it comes to entrepreneurship is not measured by age, it is measured by experience. And I think that that's something that we all navigate. We never stop navigating it. Jared, I'm on year 17 of my entrepreneurial journey. And just now I'm like, okay, now I'm starting to think like a business owner as opposed to someone who's just putting out fires and someone who's having all these different things that I want to experiment with. So I really appreciate those insights. And when I look at your landscape, and obviously you are very technically astute, I think about how disruptive of a force not just your industry is of sports betting, but AI, of course. How's AI playing into all the different things that you're doing, either internally or baking it into the roadmap of what it is that you want LetMeBet.com to progress into?
So the extent at which I use AI is not that interesting. It's the same thing that a lot of people are already doing. I really only use it to help me come out with outlines for things that I write. It's just a very quick and easy way to organize my thoughts, maybe structure them, have the AI structure it for me in a way that I, didn't think to. But really beyond that, after I have like the skeleton of, like a blog post or something that I want to write, that's where I, go from there and take it on my own. I will say though, actually recently I've been using a lot of AI for auto-filling when I'm coding. It's just sometimes, when you start writing code that, goes over 1,000 lines, it's hard to keep track of, all the variables and the constants that you're, writing. And there's some really good autocomplete features out there where it's like it's finishing your sentence if you're speaking in code. It's not, coming up with the algorithms for you or structuring it in a way, that you don't know how to, but it's just, it's if something's on the tip of my tongue in terms of code, it just kind of finishes it for me. And I found that to be very convenient.
Yeah, that's very cool. Jared, I'm totally going to put you on the spot here because I believe that everything is a microcosm of life, and therefore we can apply it to business and literally everything else. And I love the fact that you've had the passion for poker from a very young age. That's something that I've never gotten into. I don't even know how to play poker, but I also know that there's a lot of life lessons and therefore business lessons hidden within the world of poker. What are some of those things that you've picked up from that passion and hobby of yours that when you started your business, you realized, holy cow, I can directly apply that to the way I grow my business?
Some lessons I learned from poker is, so I actually was a semi-professional player in my early 20s. I was juggling my day job and then, going to poker rooms to try and do it professionally for a little bit. One thing I learned is that I don't have the endurance for that. It takes so much stamina. And anybody that knows No Limit Texas Hold'em, all it takes is one mistake or one bad beat, and your entire stack is gone, right? So you could have played perfectly for 7 hours, but if you make a mistake in the last 15 minutes or get unlucky in the last 15 minutes, the whole thing could be taken from you. The swings, the emotional swings, and the mental stamina it took, I realized that I didn't have it. The other thing that I learned from poker is it desensitized me to making big bets, monetarily speaking. I used to be a little more conservative with my money. I used to set rules with myself that I would not, spend X amount or not call a hand for more than X dollar amount. But that actually probably increases your odds that you're going to end up being a loser than not. So it really helped to desensitize me to make bigger bets, not just in poker, but in life. And I think I'd like to think that at least subconsciously it helped me and encouraged me on my entrepreneurial journey for sure.
Yeah, I love that. Risk tolerance. It's something that we all navigate and continue to navigate. And it's really cool hearing the influence that poker had on that component of your entrepreneurial thinking. I want to switch gears and talk about blog posts because obviously you've mentioned it a few times in our conversation today, and it's so core to the way that you are attracting people to your website. Jared, I feel like it's a little bit of a lost art. Everyone wants to focus on social media and paid ads, but blogging is such a beautiful medium through which we can obviously end up on the search engine, be found by more people. Talk to us about that approach because obviously you have the patience and the skills that go into SEO, but I'd love for you to offer some of those insights to our listeners who probably don't view it or haven't taken advantage of it as a traffic opportunity for their businesses.
Yeah, when I started blogging, one of the biggest mistakes I made was I was writing in not my own style, but the style that I came across most often on the internet. A very corporate, manufactured style. I don't know how else to describe it, but it just didn't seem authentic. But because that's what I saw all the time, that's what I thought that you had to do. And then I realized that really to have an edge, you have to differentiate yourself. And the only way to do that is to be genuine and have a subjective take on things. And it's even better if you can draw a past experience, to support your subjective take. So that's when I started to realize that I really have to just be myself and let my own voice flow through my writing when it comes to blog posts. And then, lo and behold, I started to see a lot more success in terms of traffic with blogging.
Yeah, I love that, especially, again, right on the back of the section where you and I talked about AI. I feel like there's a lot of not so great content out there, which listeners, you're seeing. And if you go to Jared's website, which we're going to drop that link in just a few minutes, but if you want to be one of the ones that injects your own voice, your own style, your own personality into it, the good news is there's a huge opportunity area. That's what I love about AI is when everybody starts using it and has the same type of content, you can actually stand out in the AI world by being yourself. So Jared, I really appreciate those insights. On that topic of being yourself, what are some of those things that I know that you love spending time with your family and friends? You've got an active dog that you and I talked about even before we hit record together, living in Los Angeles. What are some of those things that you've done to maintain your sanity as an entrepreneur and balance all of the things that you want to do?
Yeah, the key word is balance. Most of my 20s, I did not live a balanced lifestyle. It was, I would only do one thing. If I had a side project or a new venture, I would focus most of my waking hours outside of, if I had my day job at the time, or, I was eating or sleeping, I would just only do that. And you need to have balance. Now that I have a dog, she's a border collie. She keeps me very honest. I have to make sure that she gets her exercise every day, because it's in her genes to, run around. And yeah, I'm outside for almost an hour every day without skipping a beat, just to, give her a better life. And it made my life a lot better, because it forced me to be more balanced. I can't sleep in anytime I want, and like I used to. It's not just about me anymore. And initially you would think that it's actually taking time away from you, but it actually makes you way better at managing your time and working efficiently. And it's definitely been a net positive for me in every aspect: time management, just happiness, just mental sanity. So
Yeah, it's cool hearing that. Actually, I love asking creatives about how they unleash creativity in their work. And similar to what you said about the dog, we always think about having freedom to express yourself, freedom of your schedule, that's going to open up so many doors. But quite frequently, I hear from creatives that it's actually constraints, that they say, when I constrain myself to play in this sandbox, so to speak, that's when I start finding the creative solutions within there. And so it's actually interesting hearing you say that having something that introduces time constraints into your life and an obligation actually has enabled you to squeeze more time out of it. So it's really cool to hear those insights, Jared. I always love asking this question towards the end of our interviews, and that is a super broad question, because I always remind listeners, not only are you building LetMeBet.com, not only are you very involved in bringing solutions to the sports betting industry, but you're also one of us. You are also a fellow entrepreneur. So with that hat on, what's your best piece of advice for listeners, knowing that they're both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own business growth journeys? What's that one thing that you want to leave them with today?
Don't listen to me. I don't know more about your circumstance or what's right for you than you do. So I certainly won't try to tell you. But speaking for myself, touching on what I mentioned earlier, you have to make sacrifices, and you have to be in it for the long haul, because that's one of the things I realize is, if you're just looking for short-term gains and you think you could get into something just to flip it in 2 years or whatever, it's much more likely to fail. I think there's a crazy statistic out there that says over 90% of startups fail within the first 5 years. And, I definitely believe that. So you have to be in it for the long haul to maximize your chances of success. And the other thing I would say is, I've learned to iterate and to embrace iterating on things. Chances are the first thing that you try, the first venture that you try, it's not likely to succeed, but you should do it anyway. Even if you go into something thinking that it's not going to succeed, I think you should try it anyway, because there's so much wisdom that you can gain from it that you just can't learn from school or courses or any online resource. There's plenty of resources out there that tell you how to start a business, right? How to form an LLC or whatever. But there are no resources out there that tell you how to succeed relative to your competitors. And all businesses, they're competitions. It's not like if you just go through a checklist of how to start a business, you're going to succeed. It's all just relative. You have to perform better than your competitors, and there's no resource or one size fits all solution out there that tells you how to do that. So the only way to gain that experience is by trying and failing. So in that sense, I would say embrace iterating on things and accepting failure and being okay with it.
Yes, I love that advice, Jared. I feel like you just let listeners in on the biggest secret when it comes to content. You preface your entire advice with, don't listen to me. The truth is, don't listen to any of us, because we're all speaking. My good friend Nat Harward always says that anybody's advice is just biography. And it's true, Jared, you can only speak from your experiences. I can only speak from mine. But listeners, take Jared's advice. Start experimenting, start iterating, because whatever the two of us say while we're here on the air together may or may not be true for you. So go out there, do these things, test them, and you'll start to find your own results. Jared, I love that advice for our listeners. I'm so grateful for that. I'm also super grateful for all the things that you're building. I'm so impressed, even just from an end user perspective, both UI and UX. You have built something that it's so easy to navigate. It's so clearly laid out. I think it's brilliant the way that you're going about rolling out letmebet.com and really building it into an incredible business that serves people in a very rapidly and very huge, by the way. A lot of people are interested in sports betting. So it's cool what you're building. Drop those links on us for listeners who want to go into all the guides that you've put together. Actually, I'm going to tease this before I kick it back your way. A comprehensive guide to legal sports betting sites across all 50 states in the US. That's not an easy thing to compile and put together for people. So Jared, drop those links on us. Where can listeners go to find out more about all the great stuff that you're up to?
Yeah, the only link I'll share is the website, letmebet.com. If you're interested in finding our socials, you'll find all the appropriate links there. But that's also the name of the company. The call to action is baked into the name. So just go to letmebet.com. If you ever had an interest in sports betting, but were afraid of getting into it because it felt a little intimidating, I promise you we have resources on letmebet.com that will at least explain the basics for you and, make you a more informed bettor. And I think that's better for not just novice bettors, but even experienced bettors. You can never be too informed.
Yes, really well said. And Jared, you are spot on that this was the easiest call to action ever. You and I have dropped it a few times throughout our conversation today, but listeners, couldn't be easier than that. Letmebet.com. You'll also find it down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. So you can click right on through, or gosh, it's so easy to spell and remember, letmebet.com. Don't be shy. Otherwise, Jared, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.